Okay. So the area of our direct concern is circled here in red. It is between the Kura River in the north, here, and the Araxes in the south. But we will also deal with two other areas, one in the north foothills of the Great Caucasus, and one in the middle Euphrates Valley. As you know, the Kura-Araxes had a great extension, and it went down to the Levant area and up to the Zagros and even further east, because now we have sites in this area on the south of the Caspian Sea and around Tehran. The has long been challenging archaeologists. First with its date, because at first it was dated to the Chalcolithic period, but now we can say that it is more or less settled. We will go back to that a little later on. It has been challenging because of its migration towards the Levant, as we saw, and Iran, and its origins are still puzzling us. The last question has been already underlined and treated by many of us. And of course, I can quote here Antonio Sagona with several articles and chapters of books, but he finally never gave any answer as to these origins. And maybe I cannot give any answer yet, but I think that growing data, especially some that is coming from the very last years, may give some path towards a possible resolution. And so it is the matter of this talk. So what is of interest for our matter? There are three major questions. What does the Kura-Araxes culture consist of? When does it start? And how does it relate with the previous late Chalcolithic culture? So for the first question, what does the Kura-Araxes culture consist of? Here is a short list, and of course it is only a short list of the main points that we all know about. So the black and red polished handmade pottery with a limited number of shapes, portable earth endirons, often with figurative motifs, a diversified architecture, but often with the same arrangement inside, mostly small settlements, usually on virgin ground, a large variety of burials, but usually in cemeteries outside the settlement, and rarely in kurgans with collective inhumations. A rather egalitarian society, a society made of sedentary farmers and pastoralists, but apparently there is no full separation of the two. It had good metallurgy, but actually not many finds except hoards. And recent DNA analysis on a few, very few Kura-Araxes individuals do not show any genetic change with the previous period. So here are some examples. Examples of what I was telling you before, of the different kinds of architecture, of these endirons with figurative motifs, of the pottery, which has been separated in mainly two phases. So the earlier phase on the left and the second phase on the right. Well, this is from Armenia mostly, but you can find it almost everywhere. For instance, this is in Azerbaijan, early phase. This is still in Azerbaijan, second phase. You have pottery from Arslan Tepe in the period 6B1, so around 3000 BC, and from 6B2. And you have this red and black pottery And here are examples from Georgia. And this is the DNA analysis made by Wang et al. And the two samples they had from Kura-Araxes sites were one in Armenia and one from Velikent. So actually it is very few, but this is for the moment what we have. So this is the area we are speaking about. So when does it start? Pretty much now everyone agrees around the middle of the fourth millennium. Here is a chart that was published in 2014 by Balumbi and Chatinier. And here you see that the line is somewhere here. They even put it a little before, but actually this is debatable because many of these early sites, like the date that I give for Mentesh and Uzun Rama Kurgans in Azerbaijan, the date for Bertille Lyonnet for Areni and for Ovtula are all questionable. We could discuss that, but it is not really the matter of this talk, so I will not really go into these questions now. Actually, most of the excavated sites that we know of start rather around 3,400 BC. So how does it relate to the previous LC culture, late Chalcolithic culture? As Sagona said, very poorly. Actually, if you look at architecture, only very partly. And when it does, it is with the local architecture. I will show you examples later on. It doesn't relate at all for the pottery, which is totally different in the late Chalcolithic period, with chaff face, a color rather buff brown, and fire dogs instead of andirons. The socio-economic system is very different, and you have already elite visible even among pastoralists like at Soyub-Gulak, and of course, as it was shown in Arslan Tepe. And so you have already mobile groups that seem totally different, like at Segirdan, in Soyub-Gulak, or in the Maikop area. It doesn't relate either for the burial system, because for the moment we have not found any separate cemeteries outside settlements. And there are no cemeteries of Kurgans in the Kura-Araxes period. But as I said, the DNA analyses that have been done show rather similar. If we want to go back, to go a little deeper into these late Chalcolithic cultures, we can see that they testify of very strong northern Mesopotamia influence in the pottery, in the architecture at specific sites at least. And this from the very beginning, from the Lc1 period down to the Lc3 period. It is very well established in the east, in Azerbaijan and eastern Georgia, as also in the North Caucasus, from the Terek to the Kuban River, along the upper Euphrates at Arslan 7 and 8. But it is known only at a few sites in Armenia, like Arat Hashen, Tehut, or in the Kurgan of Aknalich. And we have very little knowledge of it west of Bertille Lyonnet in Georgia, while south of Arslan Tepe, a different cultural complex seems at work. This is the work of Francesca Balossi-Restel. So it seems that we have a vacuum here in this mountainous area, which is actually pretty much the cradle of the Kura-Araxes culture. It is as if all these North Mesopotamian influences was going around and this way. So what are the reasons for these interactions during the Lc1-3 period? We do not know, actually. So we only guess for a search for natural resources like metals, wood, wool, semi-precious stones. We have no apparent large migrations, and so we have to deal with small groups of merchants, and this would explain specific architecture, as I will show you, like at Mentesh or Leyla-Tepe. And we have at that time the first evidence of mobility with cemeteries of Gorgans. So probably these people could also help in making these interactions between different worlds. We have these intrusive elements of the material culture do coexist with local features. And by local features, I speak here of the Sioni ceramic, what Antonio Sagona had pinpointed a long time ago, but which is for me rather a cooking ware. Again, local features can be seen in the circular, often made of wattle and daub, on stone architecture houses. So here are some examples of these connections with Mesopotamia. During the Lc1 period first, so pretty much between 4,300 and 4,000 BC. Here you have the examples of Mentesh Tepe with a totally new architecture for the area, rectangular, made of mud bricks. And of course, we don't have the full plan, so it is hard to be sure, but it could even be a tripartite building. If you compare with a contemporary settlement, the one at Ovçula Tepesi, where you have a more local architecture seen from above. Pottery, the pottery for this period, I took examples from Mentesh Tepe. So you have these kind of jars with chaff tempers and with this relief decoration. Again, chaff temper bowl, painted pottery. This is the inside of the same bowl with the painted. You have these bowls with incised, we don't know exactly what it means, whether it is decoration, whether it was useful, but anyway, this is typical of North Mesopotamia at the same time. And you also have a few gray-black polished pottery, but for me, at Mentesh at least, it looks more like it is a question of poor firing, because you can see that it should be buff, but then it arrives black. And as we found this kind of hair only on small bowls that could have been put inside a larger jar or pot. This could be just an accident. Of course, so this cooking ware for me, the typical mangals, like this one too, and these you can follow for a long time, and they could be local pottery. So this is for Lc1. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot also the endirons. We have a few of them at Mentesh Tepe, always with a hole. We don't really know exactly what this hole was for, but they are usually always fired quite well. So it seems that they were used in fire, probably for cooking. During the Lc2-3 period, so that is between about 3,900 and 3,600, then the relations are even more developed and more important. Again, this is visible in the architecture at some sites, like Leyla-Tepe in Azerbaijan, where you have these grilled storage buildings and rectangular architecture, all of mud brick. The same at Bertille Lyonnet, but this is the so-called temple. When you have more local architecture, like that at Boyuk-Kesik, in close to the border between Azerbaijan and Georgia, and the pottery is really the same as the one you could find in northern Mesopotamia. Here you have these casseroles that are usually used for burials at different sites. You have these pots with grooves inside the collar here and here. You have this pottery with the potter's marks here. You have stamp seals. You have what is supposed to be a clay sickle. So these are typical of northern Mesopotamian ware. You have that also in kurgans, like those that we excavated in Pulak, also not very far from the border with Georgia and Azerbaijan, in Azerbaijan. And here is the pottery that was found in the kurgans. Again, you see with the same typical coffee grain incisions, potter's marks. You have this beautiful copper knife and this scepter with an equid head, very similar to those found in Segirdan in Iran, near Lake Gomia. And you also had at the same time, in the same kurgan, these beads made of gold. Apparently it is alluvial gold from studies that were made by Michael Johnson. And you have one bead of lapis lazuli, which means already long distance exchange, of course, carnelian, paste, and different kinds of stones. So all these, I mean, there is absolutely no doubt that there were very strong connections, relations between all this area here. So we are here with northern Mesopotamia here. It is not the only area. As I said, you have also to look at what happened in modern Caucasus. So, of course, you all know the Miko kurgan with this incredible wealth of gold and silver. But there were many other kurgans that have been excavated of this culture. And in one of them was found this cylinder seal, not very far from Maikop, still in the Koban. But actually, very few settlements have been excavated of this culture. And this is because it is extremely difficult to find them. They are made of wattle and dough. There are huts more or less circular or oval. And so they are made of wattle and dough. And for a reason still unclear, they were put on fire at the end of their use. And so this is why you find all these small pieces of clay, burnt clay. And this is how you know that you have a settlement. So it is very difficult to find. And here we found them because we are on the edge of the Krasnodar Lake. And the water is coming up and down all the time and has washed out the surface. But the pottery that was found in them and in the kurgans is really exactly still the same as the one I showed you before. So you have these jars with a very typical shape. You have these bowls with a scraped bottom. You have these potter's marks on the pots. You have andirons, and here are a few more shapes of these settlements. Here you have some C14 dates from settlement of Galiogai 3 in the Terek area. That's in the east. and in the Kuban area in the west. But as we go back to the Maikop Kurgan, because actually this Kurgan was not an C14 date for it, but looking at the material, it should date rather to the late part of the Maikop phase. And a possible guess would be around 3,600, 3,500. This was said already a long time ago, and I already had said it a long time ago, but it can be confirmed now by new discoveries that were done not long ago, as we will see a little later on. At the same, in the Maikop Kurgan, so you had not only gold, but you also had really a very interesting set of copper objects. And so here are tools. A lot of these tools were probably used for work on wood. There is a lot of artifacts dealing with wood, like this one, and the axes too. This is said to be for agriculture, but it is not sure. And what is interesting here is this red and black polished pottery that starts at that time. Here are more examples of it, though the picture is not very good, I'm sorry. At the same time, pretty much at the same time, maybe just a little later, starts what is called sometimes late Maikop, but is rather should be called Novosvobodnaya cultural complex. There you have a new black polished pottery. You have a large development of the metallurgy of course, you have different phases here. All this is not absolutely contemporaneous, but this is a typical set of Novosvobodnaya. And here is material also from this period, but coming from settlements. Here again, you see this black polished pottery or brown black with these round pellets applied, andirons. And what is important is at that period, the appearance of wheel, because we have some wagons that were found in kurgans together with Novosvobodnaya material and Novotitar culture. So here are some drawings of these ceramics and C14 from this for this material. So I don't know if you want me to go back to the metal of the Maikop Kurgan and the pottery of the Maikop, and now you look at Orkosani in Georgia, a site in the upper Kura River Valley near the border between Georgia and Turkey, excavated and published beautifully by Irina Gambashidze. And here you see again this red and black pottery or black and brown mottled polished pottery, and these very interesting set of metal tools, very similar. And here are the dates, C14 dates here. And pretty much the same material has also been found in Al-Khantepe in Azerbaijan, in the Mugan area. This has been published recently by Tufan Akhundov, who is the excavator. So sorry for the pictures, they are not very good, but you can see black pottery and red pottery, black and red. Here, all the black pottery that he has found. And interestingly, this stem, probably cup, which is very strange here. We have a C14 date for Al-Khantepe coming from a grave, and I know that other dates similar have been, are coming also from other graves that were made by Escher and Pulmach. At pretty much the same time, you also have a whole series of different kinds of polished ware: red polished, black polished, brown polished, before it started to be black and red, or red and black polished. I don't remember which is the way around. And so this is from Arslan Tepe 7, dated to 3,900 to 3,400, and the red and black polished pottery is said to come from the end of Arslan Tepe 7. And here you see our stems, pretty much the same kind of stems that I showed you for Al-Khantepe. So it is it's very far away. We are very far away. So what do these new features correspond to? Different explanations are given by the authors of the discovery. At the end of Arslan 7, newcomers are said to be from Central Anatolia. But actually, I couldn't find anything said for the earlier monochrome or black burnished ware that started a little earlier. So I don't know if Francesca or Marcella have something to say about it, but I couldn't find any comment about that. In Orkosani, Irina Gambaside also said that the newcomers were from Central Anatolia. She also relates it to Arslan Tepe, and I agree with her. For the Mycop Novosvornaya, the author Brzezinski says that these are newcomers from Central Europe. As for Al-Khantepe, Fanahundov says that he only says that they are forerunners of the Kura-Araxes culture, but he doesn't say where from. So a possible way to look at all this, knowing that there is no change actually from the genomic studies made by Wang et al., saying that there is a change in the population. If so, if there is no major genetic change, what if this black burnished pottery was a revival, maybe something that never is extinguished, of the Neolithic dark-faced burnished ware? Here you have some examples of this Neolithic dark burnished ware. You find a lot of things that are comparable, even with the pots with the small handle at the collar, relief pottery. Here also this pottery with a relief around. This is from Ofukesin a long time ago, and this is from the collection on the Neolithic in the Upper Tigris area. So I think that maybe we should look for the formation of the Kura-Araxes culture in this direction rather than coming from elsewhere. Actually, it would just be a comeback to an older tradition, but maybe a tradition that never stopped. And this dark-faced burnished ware is mainly known in southeast Anatolia, from the Amuk to the Euphrates, and even to the Upper Tigris area. So if it comes from there, then of course the genetic composition of the population would be the same also. because there is no difference, apparently, from the little information that we have. Why would it have come back? Well, of course, we know that around 3,500 BC, which is the time of the end of these relations between the late Chalcolithic of North Mesopotamia and South and Caucasus, the Caucasus, we have the intrusion of southern Mesopotamia with the colonies in the middle Euphrates up to Ajinabi. This certainly apparently destroyed the relations that happened between North Mesopotamia and the Caucasus and created a rather vacuum. So from then on, we will have three different cultural areas: the Kura-Araxes that will develop here, the Novosvobodnaya here, and the Middle Euphrates. Middle Euphrates will still be in connection with Uruk and southern Mesopotamia. And relations will be maintained more or less, and especially at the end, around 3000 BC and a little before, between the Novosvobodnaya area and the Middle Euphrates. And this is visible, for instance, with these shapes of pottery that you find in the Novosvobodnaya area that are very similar, you know, with a very flat, they call that turnip shape in the north. The same kind of shapes in the middle Uruk, in the late Uruk, sorry, and Novosvobodnaya. So these contacts between Novosvobodnaya and the Euphrates will finally end up with this royal tomb around 3000 BC. And that it is clear that there are relations between this tomb and the Grobnici or dolmen-like tombs that you have in the cemetery of Clady here, that was excavated by Rezepkin. But, and this also, you can also see a lot of relations between what happened in Arslan Tepe and a whole series of cyst graves that you have along the Middle Euphrates up to about here and in the Upper Tigris area, like at Bashur Ayuk. But I don't think that this phenomenon has to be related with the Kura-Araxes phenomenon itself. But this is a totally different story. And to develop it here would take a lot of time. So I think it's better to stop here and to keep on with this idea that maybe the formation of the Kura-Araxes has nothing to do with a totally new culture coming from elsewhere, but it is rather the local old traditional pottery coming from the dark-faced burnished of the Neolithic period. So that's all for this talk, and I have no voice anymore, so I think it's better to stop.